I'm very happy to be speaking to Caro Jongert today. Caro is a program coordinator at EdTech Startup in Residence, which is a Dutch EdTech testbed. I have personally collaborated with them in the past, and I think they're up to a great program, which is connecting EdTech startups with challenges in Dutch higher education. Participating startups are startups from all over Europe. So I really wanted to have a chat with Caro today, as they are soon going to be launching their second cohort. I think it's a great opportunity for EdTech startups to apply to their program. But first of all, thank you for joining us, Caro.
Thank you for having me.
Could you please explain in a nutshell what Startup in Residence is?
Yeah, of course. So Startup in Residence is a format which we use in all different kind of municipalities, provinces, and public institutions within the Netherlands. And Startup in Residence, EdTech specifically, is where we try to connect startups with an innovative solutions to educational institutions with a challenge. And what is different on this format is that we actually put out a European public tender, which is challenge-based. So we start with the problem from the institution, and we publish this in a tender to which startups can apply with their solution, after which they will enter a 6-month program, and they will run a pilot together to actually test and collaborate on improving the product market fit between the solution and the problem they want to solve within these institutions.
Okay, sounds great. So basically at EdTech Startup in Residence, you connect challenge owners being Dutch higher education institutions and EdTech startups in general that think they have a solution that can respond to this challenge. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay. So can you give us a little bit more detail about how the whole program works, please?
Yeah, definitely. I will show you some slides. Okay. So basically, Startup in Residence is a format to innovate between public and private parties. And it has been developed by the municipality of Amsterdam a couple of years ago. So the format is not new, it is just new, relatively new to innovation in higher education. But with this Startup in Residence format, what we do is we try to enhance collaborations and improve collaborations between public Dutch parties, so municipalities, provinces, ministries, but also educational institutions, and startups with innovative solutions. And the key to this program is that we don't start with what the market offers, so the solutions or products or services from startups, but we actually start with, in this case, the educational institutions, where we look for challenges to which they really need a better solution than they have at the moment. And what we do is we formulate those challenges, and with these challenges, we open a European public tender. And so we are actually tendering not for a specific product, but we are tendering a challenge, and to which the startups can apply. And once we have gone through the entire process of the tender and the startups and challenges have been matched by the applications, we go into a 6-month program where we try to show or actually run a pilot where we are going to co-create and investigate whether these solutions from these startups are actually a really good match to the challenges and are actually providing these institutions with a solution.
Okay, just to give an idea about the challenges, what might challenges look like? What have they been, for example, in the first cohort?
They have been very broad. So we in the first cohort we had 7 challenges in total, to which we had have filled 6 of them with different applicants. But these challenges can be really anything within the institution, but there are a few rules which we are really strict by. So the challenge has to be a problem where the urgency has really been felt on a daily basis by the people who are working in this department or division, because for us this is a really good way to ensure that people are really trying to solve this problem, and not just want to innovate because innovation is fun, because of course innovation is fun, but we all are also seriously looking for a good match to run a pilot. So people need to take it seriously on both sides. And we are also looking for problems which are scalable. So we really want to make sure that we are not making a custom fit solution which is only applicable to one institution. But afterwards, we want to ensure that when startups enter this program, we can give them like a head start, or we can help them a little bit progress faster and take this unique experience to learn from the market, to learn from their potential clients and customers. But they need to make a scalable product or service, because otherwise the startup is just not viable. So for instance, one of the challenges which I really liked last year was from the University of Tilburg, and they came up with a challenge to improve the the quality and the quantity of student feedback on courses and teachers. So they are really having an issue with the amount of students filling in the feedback on the end of the surveys on the end of the course, both on teachers but also on courses. And the challenge was to improve this the response rate of these challenges. And we had a Danish startup apply to this challenge, Student Pulse, and they actually totally flipped this around and approached this challenge from a different way. Because what happened now in the University of Tilburg is at the end of the course, all students are asked to fill out a survey, and they really asked also the right question on, but why don't the students why are the students not motivated to fill out the survey? And one of the most important things was, for example, well, if you already finished the course and you passed, it doesn't give you any added value to survey this course or this teacher, because you're never going to have anything to do with it again. So their solution was actually starting with micro surveys already before the course started. So that students are also way more intrinsically motivated to fill out these surveys. And it's also a good example of sometimes you're just so a bit stuck or lost in as to why you need a solution or what is actually the problem. And I think this is also a really good example of startup in residence actually not trying to come up with a solution already and then procuring for that exact solution, but actually being brave enough to say to the market, like, okay, we have an issue and this is happening and we don't know how to solve it. Let's try to come up with a solution together. And also this, I know for sure that everyone in the world has had surveys in their email after maybe a conference or a course, or I know, maybe just an online purchase, which they didn't fill out the survey. So it's a recognizable issue, and it's therefore it's also scalable, because we know that different parties also have to deal with this problem.
Yeah. Makes total sense.
Yeah. So what we do is we start with the procurement process, after which the startups and challenge owners enter a 6-month program. And we don't just offer them the matchmaking, but we also try to continuously elaborate on that. So for instance, the startups also get business mentors, so they not only are helped by making a match with a potential customer, but also try to advance them from a business perspective. And we have a lot of workshops around how can you collaborate and how can you make the most out of this this collaboration.
Okay, who are the mentors usually?
Good question. It's very different. I already for the startup in residence EdTech edition, we chose business mentors who also had a lot of experience already within the EdTech field specifically, because we noticed that apart from, or what makes the EdTech startup in residence EdTech program a little bit different from the other programs, is that the educational sector is such a specific market, and it also behaves in a very different way as opposed to some different markets and also different public institutions to collaborate with. So that is really what we focused on a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the mentors were some mentors had large startup EdTech startups already, or we also had an entrepreneur in the program who had made a successful exit with a EdTech startup. So we tried to get a little bit of everything. And also we don't leave this to coincidence. So from the moment that the applicants are applying, we are already trying to see what they need, and then we actively match that with a mentor who can provide them with that.
Right. So how about the 6-month collaboration period? How does that unfold?
Good question. I will show you a quick picture of what the Startup in Residence program looks like a little bit. Maybe this gives a little bit better overview. So from the 6-month program, we are actually running Startup in Residence. So you already went through a lot of the program in advance, which is mainly preparation by us and the startups applying and running through the application process. And what we start with is what we call deep dive. So when the challenge owners of the institutions are providing us with a challenge, we also challenge them, because they are not allowed to use more than one page to describe their challenge, because we want to make it really a bit more startup friendly, and not come up with a tender with a tender of like plus 100 pages. So
yeah.
we're really
Definitely not
pushing them
startup
on
friendly
making
in
it.
that case.
Yeah, we're pushing it on making it short and sweet, but it also means that most of the time you're applying to a challenge which is very briefly formulated, which gives a really good idea of what the challenge is. But of course, there are also a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So the questions is the part where we start with in the program, and we have a couple of hours where we are really going to dive deep into the problem, and the startup and the challenge owner are just together on the table, and all the questions that arise can be already put to the table. And you can also see a little bit from there what has already been tried and what didn't work or what did work. And it's just basically a kind of kickstart to an exchange of knowledge and expertise, and also see, okay, if this is our solution, how can we manage to actually prove in these 6 months that this might be a really good solution for you, because we already provided the tender in advance. After these 6 months, if the pilot is successful, the institution doesn't have to go through a tender or procurement process again. So you can continue a long-term relationship without having to go through this entire process again. And that is actually the big gain of the program, that you can test the waters, but if this is successful, then you can also just go ahead full speed. And that is what we're trying to establish with that in these 6 months. So after the first deep dive, we are working as fast as possible towards a pilot. And we do that because we want to work a little bit against the idea of that the educational system is always very slow and sometimes complex and can be hard to figure out, or how to get things moving. So we want to actually move as quick as possible.
Yeah.
And that is also what we're trying to establish with this pilot. So we chose this period of 6 months very deliberately, because it enables people to run a pilot which works for them, but also don't make it too big. So if it's too big for the 6 months, make it smaller. And that also makes it easier to start. So that for me, this works really well, because it also makes people have more focus during the pilot period, and you can see quicker results. Yeah. And sometimes it means that more tests need to be done after the 6 months, but then you actually have a head start with something to work with, and then there's also something to discuss without just having too many meetings and discussing too many things before starting.
Do you have a fixed number of iterations of development and testing of the product, or do startups and the challenge owners decide them by themselves in each scenario?
Yeah, we help them with that. We offer them some assistance, but the challenges are so broad and so different that we don't have anything fixed. So the only thing we have fixed is after 6 weeks, the startup and the challenge owner have to come up with a pilot plan, in which they are really concretely naming all the steps that they are going to take and what they need from each other to make this a successful pilot. And successful pilot does not always mean that the outcome is successful, but that you know what you want to test, that you are prepared to walk the talk actually and just go for it. But because the challenges are so different, also very different perspectives from a university point of view, we do not have any restrictions on that.
Yeah. That makes sense. So how about once the solution has been developed and the 6-month period is over, they decide whether to continue or not, but what then? Is there any involvement on the side of SIR? How does it work contractually between the university and the startups? Is there some level of binding on behalf of one party or another party or the other party, whether it be the startup or the challenge owner? All of this aspect.
That's a good question. Actually, after the 6 months, it's up to the startup and the institution to discuss further contracting. But because we started with the tender, they don't have to go through a new procurement process.
Right.
So that means that basically you don't have to compete with different companies again on your own solution on this challenge. So you can go directly into contract discussions. And we do provide the startups with, for instance, a workshop on how this contracting works and how you can deal with that. And also, this is one of the important issues that we also really urge them to talk about with their business mentors. And it is also why we offer them these mentors, because you want not only to be the pilot successful, the pilot to be successful, but you also want the startup to endure and to become successful.
And be able to scale the product outside the program and outside the single institution. Yeah,
exactly. So what SIR is how do you say it? Where SIR is actively participating is during the program and the matchmaking, so the application process. And after that, it is up to the startup and the institution, because SIR is also not in the end the challenge owner, and because we work with all these different institutions, it's also for us a good moment to take a step back and leave this up to.
How about when the solution is developed? I mean, is there any level of contractual binding as to like pricing, for example? Can suppose the program is successful and the solution that is developed is a solution that works out for the challenge owner? Then what? How can the startup come up with a pricing that is fair, and at the same time, does the challenge owner have any priority access to the solution that the startup has developed? Is the solution that was developed is it full ownership of the startup?
Yes. Yes. So the last question is actually the only one I have a really concrete answer, a specific answer to. Yes. And this is also, we get this question a lot, but this is also beneficial for both the startup and the institution, because we know that when you have a spin-off, for example, institutions often have some kind of participation within the solution. But in the end, in the long run, we do think it's beneficial for both the institution and the startup if the startup has full ownership, because you want this company to succeed and you want this company to grow, because that is also the only way that they can actually offer the institution with a proper solution and proper product. So we are not asking a startup who joins the program in that way to make this a co-creation program, but what we want to provide is kind of a unique opportunity to have access to potential customers and clients, sharing their specific case and knowledge about what works and what does not work to improve your product and to improve your product market fit. So what we've finished the first edition of the Startup in Residence EdTech program end of March, and what we got as feedback from most of the startups is that it's because you are in this program, the opportunity is unique in the sense that you just get to have very open conversation with potential clients, which you would never have gotten if it were just a sales conversation.
Sure. How about the pricing question? Are they free to set any kind of pricing once the solution is developed?
Yes, they are. What we are trying to, of course, in the end, the collaboration and the relationship building is not between the SIR team and the startup and the institution. It's between the institution and the startup. We can only facilitate in that, but we are trying to nudge the conversation about money to happen as soon as possible, because what you want to avoid is get to the end of the program and then start with a conversation where you figure out that this is absolutely not viable. But it's also a part of product development. So deciding on a pricing strategy can also be really helpful to actually have this conversation really early with your client, because you can also figure out if your innovation is actually worth developing, and what people are prepared to pay for your solution. So if you can ask a potential customer this within a safe environment, within a safe space to discuss these kind of things, it can actually really help you.
Have you seen the risk of, for example, in the case pricing considerations aren't made very early on, that startups might develop a solution that is fantastic, but the cost of which, the cost of running that solution is so high that then it doesn't match the purchasing abilities of their potential clients?
So because we only did one edition of Startup in Residence in this EdTech format, we hadn't seen it there, but it's also because we pushed pretty hard on having this conversation early enough. And for the second edition, the challenges are open now, and they're closing on the 24th of May. But we also noticed that because the departments and the themes of these challenges are so broad and different, it's hard to really make one pricing method or strategy with which to go. So in the second edition, we also have a lot of challenges which are more based on internal processes, for instance, workflow solutions. And that will require a very different pricing strategy from, for instance, if you need to license a product or service which all students will use. So it's different.
So while you were mentioning all the while you were mentioning startups, I was also thinking, well, even non-startups, even scale-ups or established EdTech companies might really benefit from this kind of connection between challenge owners and potential market providers that you are setting up at Startup in Residence. So are challenges only open to startups?
Good question. Yes, and that is mainly because one of the reasons why Startup in Residence, the Startup in Residence EdTech was formed, is because we noticed that when public institutions are going through a procurement, the startups often just fail to be able to compete with large companies because they don't have the knowledge in-house on how to successfully tender or write a tender or apply. So that was actually one of the starting points for a Startup in Residence program. And we need to kind of put boundaries on how to formulate this and also be able to run the program. So yes, it is only for startups, and we also have defined what a startup, how we can measure if something is a startup, and this is not totally fail proof. So we know that sometimes there are some companies who are who we would love to have in the program, but are not able to join because of these restrictions. But because it's a European tender, we need to put some restrictions somehow, and this is totally not. Yeah, this is complex because it's hard to define what a startup actually is. So the boundaries to which we define a startup in this program is that it cannot be founded more than 6 years ago. It cannot have more than 20 full-time employees. And it cannot be a spin-off from a company with more than 250 full-time employees. And to be able to run through this program successfully, you need to have some kind of a minimal viable product, so an MVP, because we want to avoid that people with just an idea enter the program. And if you want to run a successful pilot, you need to have some kind of MVP to be able to work with. So that is also on the, if you're talking about larger corporations which cannot join, definitely a good point. And we are also looking into where the needs of the companies within EdTech are, and seeing if we can expand in some kind of way through maybe different or additional programs around startup in residence. Yeah, and then we have basically people on two sides who are also maybe looking for this boost in innovation or boost in relationships between institutions, either on the sides where the corporations or the companies are already too large or too long into this, and also on the other side that people with an idea are struggling to see how they can make this into a company.
Yeah, sure. So in the case of the MVP that the startup might already have developed or should already have developed, can that be an MVP that is not exactly for, you know, that kind of challenge? It might be an MVP for, well, another solution, but the startup might be able to argue, hey, this MVP over here, I can adapt it during the program to the challenge that was posted in Startup in Residence. Would that be accepted?
Yes, that would be excellent, actually. So I think also there are quite some startups who enter Startup in Residence programs, not just in EdTech, but also the other programs where startups have built a product or a service for maybe a totally different application. But when they read the challenge, they think, oh, but our product would be perfect for it. So let's see if we can iterate, or we can, you know, maybe pivot a little bit or provide it as an additional service to a new industry for us. And those startups are very welcome. What we need with MVP is that if there is nothing yet, it's very hard to pilot with an institution, also because these institutions are looking for serious solutions. And after 6 months, it's very hard to have a product which you can actually work with from the ground up. So that's why we ask for this MVP.
Have any of the startups hired people during the program in order to be able to modify their MVP in such a way that it would respond to the challenge?
Not that I am aware of. I don't think so, no. And we are also trying to keep this program manageable. So we don't want startups to pour their everything and anything into this program. It's really, it's designed to be an accelerator in some sort, but it shouldn't be like this really intensive program where you cannot do anything besides it. So we ask about 4 hours a week from the startups, and about 4 to 8 hours a month in total from the challenge owner to work in this program. And that is really because we are very much aware of that time is your most scarce resource, and we want you to use it well. And also, it doesn't, in the end, we know that we figured out that it doesn't benefit a startup if you pour everything you've got into this one program, because you also need to build a business. And we want this to help you and not hold you back.
Sure, sure. So are participating startups self-funded? Well, perhaps they've had a venture capital round before that. But what I mean, are they self-funded as in, does the program give any sort of funding, or does the challenge owner give any sort of funding before the solution is developed?
Good question. No, the startups are self-funded. So what we changed this year is that there is a small fee for coming up with a good pilot plan. So after the startups have handed in a pilot plan and they actually know what they're going to do and everyone agrees on that, there's a very small fee, but it's really it's to compensate for the hours that you've put in.
Yeah.
And there is a budget available for the pilot, but it's really meant to cover costs that need to be made to be able to run this pilot. So if you need something adjusted from your MVP very specifically to this challenge, then there's a budget available, but it's limited. Also because it doesn't take that much time to run the program. And with the perspective of making sure that you are building a scalable product, it's also hard to cover these or to charge these institutions for your future product. So I think the most value is probably in knowledge exchange and also having a place where you can actually test and run this pilot with your product or service.
Yes, definitely. Could you tell a bit more about the previous cohort? What were the challenges and
sure.
what were the developed solutions?
So we already discussed one of the successful pilots, which was the response rates on surveys. But another really nice one was a challenge where the University of Utrecht was looking for a platform or a solution where they could actually more easily match challenges from the outside world, so from different organizations and companies, to student teams, to make sure that they can integrate more practical challenges within their educational programs. So these were really more business-oriented challenges to make sure that students could actually also work on real-life issues.
Yeah.
So they collaborated with the startup to make sure that companies can also more easily apply with the challenges they actually have. So it costs way less effort for also teachers to find these challenges if they want to incorporate more practical educational means to make sure that they can teach their students.
Yeah.
So that was a really nice challenge, but very different from the response rates. And then we had a third pilot running, which was also very cool, which was about academic writing skills. So the Haagse Hogeschool, which is the University of Applied Sciences from The Hague, which is a not unpronounceable word for non-Dutchies.
Absolutely.
They figured out that students sometimes were really struggling with academic writing, but they only very often only found out about this when they actually had to write, for instance, their thesis at the end of their studies. And then it's really hard to catch up with these skills because you would actually prefer it if students could develop on these academic writing skills, which are very different from our normal day-to-day talk and writing, more early on in their studies so they can develop it more steadily. And another difficulty on this challenge is that giving feedback on academic writing is complex because you have all these different courses and different teachers, and this is a skill which is not often taken into account when grading or when examining for more on an in-depth level of a course or a subject. So they work together with another startup where they actually provided them with the tool which checked on their academic writing skills when they handed in papers or different assignments. Yeah. And then the student can also see the errors or improvements they could make. So you're continuously improving these academic writing skills. So these were all based on the connection pretty much between students and teachers, or students and companies. So in all these challenges, students were involved, but we also had one challenge where, which was more focused on the background or the workflow behind building a course. So this challenge was called Blended Learning Blueprints. And this challenge was more based around that every teacher has so many different ways of actually building a course where they want to blend all these different kinds and ways of teaching, but also base it on what they actually want to teach or the level of knowledge they want to provide them with. Do you want to just show it? Do you want them to be able to practice it? Do you want to be able to let them explain it? And they were looking for a tool or a solution where they could help teachers make decisions about which blended learning tools they wanted to incorporate in which part of their course, and then basically build a blended learning blueprint from which teachers could also take inspiration and maybe see how they could improve their course. So this had no students involved whatsoever, but was really focused on making it easier for teachers to improve their course.
Yeah, so here you described now a total of 4 challenges, I think.
Yeah.
So all of these challenges developed a solution, and after 6 months, this solution was then discussed whether the university would adopt the solution or not. Is that how it worked?
No, not really. We started with a total of 7 challenges, and through the tender we had applications for 6 of them. So we also didn't fill out one challenge because we just couldn't find a solution in the market yet. And then we started with 6 startups, and we had, in the end, after the pre-pilot phase, so building this pilot plan, we started with only 3 pilots that were actually running, because this pre-pilot phase is also so important in the way that you're also figuring out, do we actually want to put in this effort, because is it going to solve our issue for both the startup and the challenge owner? And sometimes then you also figure out that it's maybe not the right time or not the right moment or not the right fit, and that's also okay. I'd rather you figure it out then than after you've been trying to contact an institution or a university for 2 years and see if you can do some tests together and just put in this endless effort. And we also had one startup go well, not bankrupt, but they were a spin-off from another company, and the mother company pulled the plug on them. So then that also happens. And I think in wrapping up the first program, we also talked with a startup and a challenge owner on stage with why they did not continue. And I think this conversation might even be more important than the conversation on why everything is successful. I mean, we know that in building a business, it's not always going the way you want it to, and most often it's not going the way you want it to. So we need to discuss this, and we need to have an open conversation about this.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, the startup success ratio is a very low ratio, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So it's totally predictable that this would happen, and it's totally fine. In fact, I mean, I think you're saying that out of 6 startups, 3 are still working with universities. That's a really high ratio, actually.
We're really proud of that.
And it's probably because of having these chances to co-develop, basically. I don't know if we have we're within the boundaries to use the term co-development here. Perhaps it would be interesting to hear you on this, but in any case, the chance that Startup is in Residence is giving them is probably behind this really high ratio of startups continuing in the delivery of the product that was developed. Let's dive into this co-development word. Would you say there is an aspect of co-development here?
Yes and no. Definitely, because we are really trying to enforce this exchange of knowledge and expertise to improve these products or services for startups with the knowledge of these institutions. And in the end, we do this because you want to solve this challenge and then we get back to where we started with, like in the first minutes. We want this to be an urgent problem. We want people to really be looking for a solution. And if you're really looking for a solution, you are also looking for a healthy business who can provide you with that solution. So in a way, it's co-development because you are really getting your hands dirty in this pilot with both the challenge owner and the startup. But no, because in the end, the startup is still a business and the institution will be a potential client. So you do have to deliver. It's not, if you don't deliver, you're not going to get there. So that is why in the end we're trying to build an environment where we can very freely talk about all these topics that you need to build to develop your product and your business, but you are the one in charge. So in the end, the startup has to come up with it.
So why startups, as in from the university perspective? I mean, we were saying universities can buy solutions from established EdTech companies. So what is the interest on the side of a university, on the side of a higher education institution? I know in the Netherlands, there's this difference between university and University of Applied Science and all that. Maybe we shouldn't dive into that here, but let's say higher education institutions. What's their convenience in participating in the program and having, procuring from startups rather than from established EdTech companies?
I think there are multiple advantages. One, because universities are also, or the institutions are also actively searching how they can avoid only using big tech. So big tech is a big conversation, topic of conversation here. So people are aware of that and also looking for sometimes different companies. The second one, and the most obvious one, is because they have a problem and they need it to be solved, but they can't find the right market solution yet. And that is actually where these innovational products come in. And these innovations are most often started by these startups. And then the third big reason is because they get to have some kind of say, or at least give input on how this product should develop to actually fix their challenge or their solution, how this product should fix their problem. Startups are just way more easy to iterate. So they can go faster, they can change faster, and we are also not looking for people who have 100% developed their product and just want to sell it. That's not then this is not the right program for you. You actually need to collaborate and need to work together to make sure that your product fits the market, and that's just way easier within a startup than within a multinational.
I think in my previous question, there was a concept embedded within my previous question. That concept being, do universities procure EdTech solutions? And I think perhaps it's worth taking a step back and discussing that first. Do you think Dutch universities, Dutch higher education institutions outsource enough of what they're doing to external providers, external market providers, or is in a sense your program also kind of a way to nudge universities to think, hey, if I have a problem, not only I can also try to outsource it rather than develop a solution in-house?
Good question. I think it's complex because these institutions are actually just very, very large corporations, of course, in itself. So what we try with the Startup in Residence program is to offer them an alternative to what they are doing now.
Yeah.
And what we see from within institutions is that they are very open to experiment with these alternative solutions. So you asked before, like, why these 6 months? It's also because for people within an institution who want to try a different method, this is comprehensible. It's large enough that you can actually accomplish something, but it's also small enough and contained enough that it doesn't bring too much risk.
Yeah.
And I think you also know that within the educational sector, people are quite risk averse.
Yeah.
So what we try to do is create a very open space where we have a lot of room for innovation without making it feel very unsafe with the idea of doing something completely new. So we cannot force institutions to work in a different way, but if we don't offer them any alternative to how they're doing it, how they've always been doing it, and how they will do it in the future, then it also won't change.
Yeah. And I think it's worth mentioning institutions are particularly risk averse, as in private initiatives in education. Sorry, public initiative in education are particularly risk averse. But I think the private sphere globally is a little more willing to take risks, and by connecting these two areas, well, perhaps we can leverage the risk proneness, if we should call it such, of the private sphere to develop some innovative solutions that perhaps less risk, more risk averse public institutions are not willing to take. Well, Caro, thanks a lot for being with us today. It was a pleasure to talk to you, and well, I am very confident in the potential of Startup in Residence and in its impact in connecting EdTech solutions and innovative providers with challenges in higher education. So I really appreciate all the work that you guys are doing. I hope, well, I think we have a major announcement, to be fair, which is you're launching your second cohort, right?
Yes, we are. So we have 9 new challenges open at the moment. And all startups from the European Union can still apply to those until May 24th. So yeah, I say check it out.
Yeah, what are the challenges? Just a couple of them. I please don't.
We have an extra hour.
I
will send the link, and I think it's because they are super diverse this time. So it's from VR solutions to improve soft skills with students, to workflow solutions to be able to plan tests easier. It's really within every corner and sector of institutions. Yeah.
Okay. Well, when is the deadline for your application?
May 24th.
Okay. Thanks a lot for being with us today, and good luck with the second cohort.
Thanks for having me, and nice seeing you.